Ever had that feeling where something most people find, I don't know, comforting or even fun, just makes your skin crawl?
Hmm.
Maybe it's heights or spiders or even something as everyday as a dog running towards you, tail wagging.
Right. And that last one is what we're diving into today, cynophobia.
Exactly. The intense fear of dogs, wolves, really any canine.
And it's funny, isn't it? So many people absolutely adore dogs, can't imagine life without them.
Oh, totally.
But for, well, a significant number of people, just the thought of a dog can bring on serious anxiety.
Yeah, this isn't just like not being a dog person.
No, not at all. Cynophobia is a clinical thing, a specific phobia.
Right.
It falls under that animal phobia category.
And what really struck me looking into this is just how common animal phobias are generally.
It's surprising, right?
Yeah. Our sources say over a third, like 36% of people seeking treatment for any specific phobia report fearing dogs or cats.
36%, that's huge.
It is. So you see all these happy dog owners.
Mm.
But statistically, more than 1 in 3 people getting help for a phobia are grappling with that exact animal. It's kind of this invisible divide.
It really highlights the impact, doesn't it? And with cynophobia specifically, dogs are just everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Think about it. You mentioned the numbers. 25 million stray dogs estimated in India. Was it 62 million pets in the U.S.?
Yeah, something like that. Massive numbers.
So for someone with this phobia, just getting through the day can feel like navigating a minefield.
Absolutely. And you can see how dog owners might just not get it,
Right.
not grasp the intensity.
Totally understandable.
So that's kind of our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To really unpack cynophobia.
Yeah, let's get into it.
We want to explore, okay, what is the specific definition? How's it diagnosed? Where might this fear come from? And crucially, what treatments actually work?
Hopefully we can provide some clarity, maybe even a few surprising insights along the way.
Right. So let's start with the basics. This intense fear is more than just being wary, right? What are the official markers?
Okay, so fundamentally, cynophobia is, yes, a persistent, overwhelming fear of dogs or canines. It's a specific phobia animal type.
Mhm.
And the DSM, that's a diagnostic manual, the DSM-IV-TR version our sources use, lays out specific criteria.
Like what?
Well, one key thing is a persistent fear that gets triggered either by actually seeing a dog or even just like anticipating seeing one.
So more than just being startled by a sudden bark.
Oh, definitely. The criteria also state that exposure almost always triggers an immediate anxiety response, like right away.
Okay.
And interestingly, adults with cynophobia usually recognize that their fear is excessive, like out of proportion to the actual danger.
But kids might not.
Kids might not know, they might just feel the fear intensely. And another big one is avoidance. People will actively avoid places or situations where they might encounter dogs. Or if they can't avoid it, they endure it with just intense dread. Imagine planning your walk to work specifically to avoid the house with the barking dog.
Wow. Yeah. That really paints a picture of how limiting it can be.
It absolutely is. And that's another criterion. The fear has to significantly interfere with their daily life, their job, social life, family stuff, you name it.
Makes sense.
And for anyone under 18, the symptoms need to have been going on for at least 6 months.
6 months. Okay.
And finally, the anxiety or panic or avoidance shouldn't be better explained by some other condition like OCD or PTSD.
You mentioned panic attacks there. What does that actually feel like for someone going through it?
Yeah, our sources describe a panic attack as this sudden wave of intense terror. It usually only lasts a few minutes, but it feels awful.
I can imagine.
Physically, you might get like a racing heart, sweating, trembling, feeling like you can't breathe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, an overwhelming urge to just flee, dizziness, lightheadedness,
Yeah.
dry mouth, even nausea. It's a whole body response.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. And that kind of reaction,
Mm-hmm.
it could be set off just by seeing a dog. Or even less.
Yes, the range of triggers is pretty wide. It can definitely happen from encountering a real dog face to face.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, even just thinking about dogs or seeing pictures or, a dog on TV can set it off.
Just a picture. Wow.
Yeah. And that's a big reason why the avoidance becomes so strong. People might stop going to parks entirely or always cross the street if they see someone with a dog, even turn down invitations to houses where they know there's a dog.
It really shows how much it can shrink someone's world.
Mm.
So, okay, we know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
When does it typically start? Is it a childhood thing?
Mostly, yeah. The research generally points to animal phobias, including cynophobia, starting in early childhood, often between, say, 5 and 9 years old.
Okay, that makes sense.
But interestingly, there was a study, I think it was in South Africa, that found cynophobia could develop later, too, sometimes even as late as age 20.
20. Huh. That's quite a range then.
It is, yeah. Wider than I might have guessed initially.
And are certain groups more likely to experience this? Is there like a gender difference?
There seems to be, yes. Studies consistently find that animal phobias are reported more often by women.
Really?
Yeah, some data suggests that like 75% to even 90% of people seeking treatment specifically for animal phobias are women.
Wow. 75 to 90%. That's a really significant difference.
It is quite striking.
Do the sources happen to say why that might be? Or is that still kind of an open question?
That's a good question. The sources we looked at highlight that prevalence, but they don't really dig deep into the reasons for the gender split. It's definitely an area where more research would be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the why. How does someone actually develop this really intense fear?
Well, a really influential idea comes from S. Rachman back in 1977. He proposed 3 main ways, or pathways, that fear can be acquired.
Okay, what are they?
So the first one is pretty straightforward. Direct personal experience, like being bitten by a dog, or maybe chased aggressively, a bad encounter.
Right, makes sense.
The second is observational experience. So you might see someone else get attacked or be really frightened by a dog. You witness it.
Ah, okay. Learning by watching.
Exactly. And the third pathway is informational or instructional experience. This is where you learn dogs are dangerous, maybe through warnings from parents, reading scary stories, or even just picking up on a parent's own fear and avoidance.
Those all sound like pretty logical ways a fear could start.
Yeah.
But for cynophobia, is one of those pathways usually the main culprit?
Well, there was a study done at the State University of New York that looked into this specifically with women who feared dogs versus those who didn't.
And what do they find?
Interestingly, they found that negative experiences with dogs, like being snapped at or whatever, were actually pretty common in both groups.
Oh, really? Even in the non-fearful group?
Yeah. The key difference seemed to be their expectations about what would happen if they encountered a dog. The study basically suggested that while, yes, a bad experience can contribute, other factors are probably at play in determining if it actually becomes a full-blown phobia.
So it's not always just dog bit me. Now I'm scared of dogs.
Apparently not. It seems more complex than that simple cause and effect.
Okay, so if it's not always direct experience, are there other theories floating around about the causes?
Oh, definitely. Arne Ehrman proposed a really interesting evolutionary angle.
Evolutionary. How so?
He suggested that maybe fears of certain animals, like dogs or snakes or spiders, could be sort of an evolutionary leftover, an innate tendency we have to fear things that could have been predators to our ancestors.
Like a better safe than sorry instinct hardwired in.
Exactly. It would have been super useful for survival way back when. Now, maybe it sometimes gets triggered inappropriately in our modern world where, most dogs aren't actually a threat.
That makes a lot of sense from a survival perspective. Fascinating.
And then there's Martin Antony, who works a lot with phobias. He suggests that sometimes when none of Rockman's 3 pathways direct, observed, informational seem to fit, and the person hasn't, forgotten a traumatic event, biological factors might be a fourth possibility. Maybe some people have a genetic predisposition towards fearfulness or some kind of inherited defense mechanism.
So it could be partly genetic, too.
It seems likely that it's often a mix, doesn't it? Probably a complex interplay between what we learn, what we experience, and maybe our underlying biology or even evolutionary history.
Wow. It's amazing how our personal past and maybe even our deep, deep ancestral past could feed into something like this. Okay, so the big question then, what can actually be done? If someone has cynophobia, what are the treatment options?
Well, the good news is there's some really effective treatments out there for specific phobias like this.
It's great to hear.
Yeah, the most common and well-supported ones are systematic desensitization and something called in vivo therapy or exposure therapy.
In vivo,
Oh,
meaning
yeah.
in real life.
Exactly. Real-life exposure.
Okay, let's break those down. Systematic desensitization first. What does that look like?
Right. So this method was developed by Joseph Wolpe. It basically combines teaching relaxation techniques with having the person imagine situations that trigger their fear.
Imagining. So not with a real dog.
Not initially, no. It's done in a controlled setting, like a therapist's office. The person starts by visualizing a scenario involving a dog that makes them anxious.
Okay.
The therapist helps them rate their anxiety level, how scared they feel just imagining it. Then they guide the person through relaxation exercises, deep breathing, muscle relaxation, that kind of thing, while they keep picturing the scene.
Ah, so you learn to relax while thinking about the scary thing.
Precisely. The goal is to keep doing this until imagining that specific situation doesn't cause anxiety anymore. You gradually work through increasingly scary imagined scenarios. It's like gently weakening the fear's grip in a safe mental space first.
Okay, sort of like dipping your toes in, mentally speaking.
Kind of, yeah. And remember that South African study we mentioned? They used systematic desensitization for cynophobia and actually found it was pretty successful. About 75% of the participants showed significant improvement after, I think it was about 8 months of therapy.
75% is pretty good.
It is encouraging, yeah. But there are some potential limitations, too.
Like what?
Well, B.K. Wiederhold, who does research using virtual reality for anxiety.
Oh, interesting. VR.
Yeah. She questioned how effective systematic desensitization really is because it relies so much on the person's imagination.
How so?
Like, how accurately can someone imagine the threat? Maybe their imagined anxiety doesn't quite match what they'd feel in a real situation.
Ah, I see. The imagined fear might not be intense enough, or maybe too intense.
Exactly. Which is why there's been interest in using VR virtual reality to potentially create more realistic but still safe and controlled scenarios for this kind of therapy. Though when our sources were published, the effectiveness of VR specifically for cynophobia was still being studied.
That makes sense. A virtual dog could feel a lot more real than just picturing one. Okay, so what about the other main approach in vivo, the real-life exposure therapy? I hear that one's often seen as the gold standard.
Yes, in vivo exposure is very often considered the most effective treatment. It involves, like the name says, systematic and prolonged real-life exposure to an actual dog.
Prolonged. So not just a quick glance.
Right. The idea is to stay in the presence of the dog until the fear response naturally decreases. You learn through direct experience that nothing bad is happening.
Okay. And how is that structured? Is it like multiple sessions?
It can be. It's often done over several sessions, gradually increasing the intensity or duration of exposure. But interestingly, a study by Lars Geren Est back in 1988 showed it can even be effective in a single longer session.
A single session. Wow, that sounds intense.
It can be, but very effective. In Est's study, they used exposure therapy combined with modeling. Yeah, where the therapist first demonstrates interacting positively and calmly with the dog. Then the person with the phobia is gradually exposed to the dog. They're encouraged to get closer, maybe eventually touch or interact with the dog as their anxiety naturally comes down.
So a therapist shows it's safe first.
Exactly. And the session usually continued until the person's reported fear level dropped by at least 50% or was gone completely.
And the results were good.
They were remarkable, honestly. 90% of the patients were rated as much improved or completely recovered after an average of just over 2 hours of this therapy.
2 hours. That's incredible.
It really is. And importantly, a follow-up study years later, I think 7 years later, found that those improvements were maintained.
Wow. So it wasn't just a temporary fix.
No, it seems to create lasting change. It's not just about facing your fear in a vague sense. It's about this systematic, real-world interaction that helps essentially rewire the brain's fear response through direct, safe experience.
That's really powerful. So facing the fear directly, but in a controlled, supported way.
That seems to be the key. And the good news doesn't stop there. Exposure therapy principles can also be adapted for self-help.
Oh, really? How would someone do that on their own?
Well, on their own usually means with the help of a trusted friend or family member who isn't afraid of dogs, someone who can be a calm assistant.
A helper. What's the process?
First, the person with the phobia creates what's called a fear hierarchy.
A hierarchy, like a list.
Exactly, a list of dog-related situations ranked from the absolute least scary thing they can think of all the way up to the most terrifying. And they rate their fear level for each one.
Example.
Maybe looking at cartoon pictures of dogs is a 1 out of 10, seeing a small dog on a leash across the street is a 4, and petting a large friendly dog is like a 9 or 10.
Got it. Step 1, list your fears. Then what?
Then with the helper, they identified the specific things about dogs that trigger the fear. Is it the size, the barking, the sudden movements, the unpredictability?
Pinpointing the triggers.
Right. Then the helper assists them in recreating the least fearful situation from their list in a safe, controlled way. Maybe just looking at photos together at home.
Okay.
And the person stays in that situation, practicing relaxation until the fear naturally subsides. They learn, okay, I looked at the picture and I'm okay.
Reinforcing that it's safe.
Exactly. And once that step feels manageable, they move up to the next item on their hierarchy, repeating the process, gradually getting closer to real dogs in controlled ways. There are even videos online showing positive human-dog interactions that can be used as part of this.
So it's a very gradual, step-by-step approach to facing the fear.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Very manageable, taking it one step at a time.
Okay. And how long does treatment usually take, whether it's therapy or self-help?
You know, the number of sessions really varies from person to person, but the research, like that OST study follow-up, suggests that once someone achieves significant improvement, it generally lasts long-term.
That's encouraging.
It is, but one really important thing, both during and after therapy, is consistent, safe, real-world interaction with dogs.
To keep reinforcing the positive experiences.
Exactly. Because avoidance, as we talked about, just feeds the phobia. You need those ongoing positive or neutral exposures to really solidify the gains and prevent the fear from creeping back in.
That makes total sense. Wow, this has been incredibly informative.
Glad to hear it.
So just to kind of wrap up the key points. Cynophobia is, well, it's a real and surprisingly common phobia. It has clear diagnostic signs.
Right. It's not just dislike.
And it seems to stem from a mix of things, maybe bad experiences, maybe seeing others have bad experiences, things we're told, and possibly even deeper evolutionary or biological factors.
It's a complex origin, most likely.
But the really hopeful part is that there are very effective treatments, especially exposure therapy, which seems to have fantastic results in actually helping people overcome this fear.
Absolutely. It really shows how important it is to recognize these fears and know that help is available because they really can impact someone's life so profoundly.
Yeah. You know, this whole deep dive into cynophobia, it leaves you with a lot to think about, doesn't it? Like thinking about that evolutionary perspective, it makes you wonder how many of our modern anxieties are maybe echoes of old survival instincts that aren't quite relevant anymore.
That's a fascinating question. How much of our ancient wiring still runs the show today?
Right. Or looking at how effective exposure therapy is. Maybe there's a lesson there for other parts of life, areas where we avoid discomfort or difficulty and maybe limit ourselves by doing so.
That's a great point. Facing discomfort in a managed way could unlock a lot of potential in other areas too. Really important things to consider.
Definitely.
And of course, for anyone listening who wants to learn more about specific phobias or anxiety in general, there are loads of great resources out there from mental health organizations and reputable online sources.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive today.
My pleasure.
We really hope this exploration of cynophobia has offered some useful clarity and maybe, some surprising insights for you.